This is Right on the Money with Tom Mosley, founder of Mosley Wealth Management.
Our mission at Mosley Wealth Management is to help people make sure they never run out of income the rest of their life and they pay as little as they're legally required to pay in taxes.
Since 1995, Tom Mosley and his team have been creating comprehensive, custom financial plans to help you preserve what you've earned and pursue what you've envisioned.
In retirement, a lot of people have built a great lump sum. We call that your lumber yard. But you need a blueprint to put that lumber yard into a plan that you can build a retirement house to live in.
What's on your mind this week, Southern California? The stock market, taxes, inflation, income, Social Security, how to ease into the life of your dreams? Let's discover conservative financial strategies starting right now. This is your Right on the Money Radio Hour with Tom Mosley.
And a very happy weekend to you. You are listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management based right here in Southern California, and I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. Each week, we are committed to providing you with retirement planning solutions. We've got another great show for you this weekend. Tom, my friend, it's always a joy to be with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's always super to be with you too, Kristen, because no matter if I wake up and I'm having a good day or a bad day, you're always so cheerful. So I'm always glad to be with you.
Well, thank you. The feeling is mutual, and we are so glad to be with all of you. We know that several of you are tuning in, week out. We so appreciate you joining us. And we have a really fascinating show today that, Tom, I would love for you to share with our listeners. I know you did a podcast on this subject recently, and you got such a great response that you wanted to build it into a full radio show. So talk about that.
Well, whether you're retired or whether you're just tired, and you're 30 and you're tired or whatever, your home is a really big financial consideration, and particularly in retirement. And in California, there are so many people who are contemplating moving out of California. So recently I did a part of what we're going to incorporate into this show in a podcast about, so you're considering relocating. You're thinking about moving out of California. Well, so many people are. You read the news reports and tons of people are exiting California. And I see it in my practice. I have never marketed in any state except California. But I've got clients in 23 states. Mm-hmm. Guess how they got there, Kristen? They started in California and they escaped. They moved, they got out of here. And the biggest factor in almost all cases, there's some people who have tremendous amounts of money and savings for retirement, but the biggest factor in many of those cases was the home. It, in many cases, is by far the biggest financial investment that you've got. It's your biggest account, you might call it that way, and you might look at it that way. And so today we're just going to talk about the home, having a home, not having a home in California, having a home in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or wherever you want to go. We're just going to talk about the home today. So sit down, even if you're in your car, which many of you consider your home in California, but even if you're in your car, sit down and let's talk about your home.
Absolutely. Well, and just to go on that, I know we'll talk about this later on in the show, but there was a recent Smart Asset and 𝗪𝗡𝗍 study, and California ranked as the #1 state to lose retirees in 2022 and 2023. And I'm seeing that. I'm hearing from friends that live in other parts of the country how many folks they're meeting who are moving from California to their state. So it almost seems like there is a mass exodus happening.
Yeah, I hear several things. I hear the prices of homes are escalating rapidly where we live because California people are moving in. I hear this when I go to Florida. I hear it when I go to Texas.
Yep, Idaho's another big one, right?
Yep, Idaho, you got Tennessee, all of those people. And the majority of the people coming in, I was with a pastor friend of mine in Greenville, Texas a couple of weeks ago. And he was telling me, he said, Greenville's exploding. And I said, are the people moving outside of Dallas-Fort Worth? Because it's about 50 miles from Dallas-Fort Worth. He said, no, they're coming from California. And so many people are moving out of California because of a lot of things. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show today.
Yep, for sure. Well, the first thing we want to talk about is I know that there was an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal within the past year. And the title of it was, "There's Never Been a Worse Time to Buy Instead of Rent." And it's interesting because there's some people who argue against owning your home. So let's start off by talking about that because there are several significant financial considerations that come with choosing to own a home during retirement.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of the people who are listening, and I'm thinking you may be in your 20s and you're thinking about saving money for a home. You may be in your 40s and you're thinking about maybe upgrading your home, or you may be in your 60s and you're thinking, do I really want to own a home in retirement? Or you may be thinking, yeah, I want to own this home. I want to live in this home the last day that I live, and I want to get it paid off. So wherever you are, there are a lot of different
Scenarios.
scenarios.
People want to downsize too, right? Potentially, maybe move to a smaller home.
There are so many things, but this article that you brought up from the Wall Street Journal is so timely because with interest rates having escalated in the past 2 or 3 years with the inflation we've had since 2021, with that 20+% inflation and 33% inflation on homes, and then interest rates are 3 times what they were 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So many people are sitting back and considering, should I own a home or not? And that's what this Wall Street Journal article said. It might be time just to sit back and rent because of what you can rent. That article provoked me to go to the websites, is what we'll call them. Used to be Zillow was the only one, but they've got Redfin and Reddit and other things. And so I began to look up the values of home. And like my home here in Southern California would rent for $5,200 a month. But my home in Southern California, if you bought it with a 10% down payment, your payment would be $8,900 a month.
Wow.
So that's the difference. And that's what they're considering. So there are a lot of reasons you may be sitting there. And I'm thinking about the person, and we have them. It seems like, Kristen, I've been doing it 29 years. I've been working with retirees almost all of that time. And before, the people who had money, who wanted to turn it into a retirement plan, were coming in, and it was almost a given they owned a home. Okay. It was almost a given. That home was owned. I am amazed at how many people are coming to our seminars, who are listening to our radio show, listening to our TV show, who are in their upper 50s or 60s, and they've decided to rent, or they've always rented, or they don't have a home. And these are people with assets.
Right.
These are people who could buy a home potentially. So, there's some reasons why people wouldn't buy a home. Okay. And, just strictly the mortgage payment, as I just said,
Right.
Sometimes the mortgage right now, with the interest rates what they are, those thrilling days of yesteryear, as the Lone Ranger used to say, those thrilling days of yesteryear of the 1.79 and the 1.95 and the 2.16, those interest rates are gone. I did see an article this week recently where it said that interest rates now are lower than they've been since 2022, but still they were north of 6% on the average. So,
Right.
So if you're in retirement, or if you're thinking about buying a home, you've got to consider the mortgage payment. And sometimes people are in retirement, and I have them come in recently, and Kristen, because of maybe some curveballs that the world has thrown them, that mortgage payment is huge.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'll ask them, I'll say, well, what's your interest rate? Oh, well, it's only 2.4. Okay, it's 2.4. That's good. How many years do you have left? And amazingly, I hear so many people that are in their mid 60s to upper 60s say, well, we just refied about 2 years ago or 3 years ago when rates were low.
Right.
So that means that they're going to carry that debt, that weight of that debt every single month, almost for the rest of their life, if not past the rest of their life. So one reason that some people are saying, well, sell the house and get out of it and take your equity and go rent, and because rents are lower right now and the mortgage payments are higher if you have to refi and you have to get another loan right now and you have to get new taxes based on that loan and that higher price, you're not going to have your Proposition 13 in many cases. And that brings us into property taxes. Property taxes are so high.
Yes. It's an ongoing cost too, right?
It is. It's both and. I had somebody recently tell me we rent because we write one check. And I said, what do you
Mhm.
mean? Well, we don't have any property taxes because
Mhm.
there's no property tax to tack on, and there's no home maintenance and repairs. And a lot of times if you've got a house that's 30 or 40 years old and you say, well, we don't have a house payment, praise the Lord. Well, that's great. That is great. But if it's 40 or 50 or 60 years old, you bought it not new, you bought it already used, it may need a lot of repair and a lot of things are going wrong and insurance is tacked on top of that
Mhm.
and and all kind of, and it's nice to have the equity, but it is what I'm saying is it's not just a 1, 2, 3 easy answer anymore. It's
Right.
not just a true false. It's not just a yes no. As
Mhm.
to there are some reasons that you should not invest in a house. I would say that if you don't have a home right now, now's not probably a good time to buy unless you can buy the whole thing.
Right. Well, those stats from that article was that it was 52% more expensive to buy a home than to rent one because of where we are with mortgage rates right now.
I mean, that's, what you just
Staggering.
said, Kristen, is this whole segment in a capsule. What's it really going to cost you? And we think interest rates are going to go down, but historically, interest rates on homes are about where they are right now. They're in that
Mhm.
5, 6, 7% range. We just got used to that 1.79 and 2.16, and we just got used to interest rates that we've never seen before and we might not ever see again.
Right.
So there's so many things to consider about maybe now, even the possibility of not having a home, mortgage payments, property taxes, the things we talked about, home maintenance, repairs,
Mhm.
insurance. I mean, they're and the old house and a lot of times too, you've got a little equity in the home, but you don't have very much other fund money anywhere else.
Mhm.
And there might be $300,000 or $400,000 sitting there in equity, but you might not be able to qualify for a reverse mortgage
Right.
where you can get paid out because usually those reverse mortgage companies will only give you, up to 60% of the value of the house. Here's what we're saying in this segment. If you're sitting out there and you're dying to buy a house and you don't have one, you might die if you buy a house, okay?
Mhm.
You might die financially if you have a house. Do you need some input on that? That's one thing that we would be more than happy to just sit down and talk through with you to see if it's a smart financial decision for you to actually invest in a house. But you've got to pick up the phone and call and get in touch with us, sit down with one of our advisors, and we can talk through this with you.
Absolutely. We know that there's so much that goes into this housing conversation. And really, it's just one of the many pieces that fit as part of your complimentary retirement blueprint. So to claim yours from Tom and the team of Mosley Wealth Management, all you need to do is call 888-930-5609. Don't go anywhere. We've got a lot more to cover on today's discussion about should you be buying a house? Should you be renting? What should you do as you enter and are in retirement regarding the housing conversation? Stay with us. We'll be back after this.
Social Security is easy, right? The question is, should I take it now or later? Well, there are dozens and dozens of ways to take Social Security if you're single and even more if you're married. This one-time decision can also affect how much you pay in taxes, how much you receive in lifetime payouts for you and possibly your spouse. You could increase your nest egg by tens of thousands of dollars just by being informed, and unfortunately, the Social Security office is not allowed to give you comprehensive financial planning advice. You've paid into Social Security for decades. Don't you want to make sure you optimize your retirement income? Build your Social Security benefits into a retirement income plan with all of your assets. Get your own tailored, no-cost Social Security income strategy with Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management. 888-930-5609. Tom Mosley and the team have helped thousands of folks like you in Southern California plan for their retirement. Now make the call yourself. 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609.
Welcome back to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and today Tom and I are discussing home ownership, to buy or not to buy, to rent or not to rent. And, it's interesting because we've been talking about just where we are currently in this economic environment of higher interest rates. That article from the Wall Street Journal that stated that it's 52% more expensive to own a home right now versus renting. And, Tom, one of the reasons I think that a lot of folks can easily get into trouble with home ownership is they only focus on the four letters PITI. So that stands for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, right? There's two I's in there. But
Right.
they forget about the other four letters you got to pay attention to. I call it ROMI: repairs, upkeep, maintenance, and improvements. And it's very easy to forget that once you have a home, I think one of the stats I read is you're supposed to be putting 3% of the cost of your home back into it every year in terms of upkeep and maintenance and repairs and improvements. And, that can add up really quickly. It's not just those four things that people often focus on.
Those are the things that we let go. Those are the things that we get used to. We're used. I used to have a friend who said, you can get used to crud. You know what I mean? And his idea was you can get used to less than stellar. And usually when if you're used to crud or not is when you have somebody coming over and you say, oh, we got to clean that up.
Right.
We got to fix that. We got to do something about that. And a lot of times in a home, it's a bigger deal because it's more of a long-term thing. You get used to settling for less because you're okay to live in that home. But then if you were to sell it, if you were to have company come or somebody were to move in with you, which a lot of people do when they're older, they have roommates come in, you just don't want to live that way. They don't want to live that way, and you want to make it attractive. So that's when you have that ROMI come in that you talked about, and that repairs, upkeep, maintenance, and improvements that you've got to continue to do, or the house is going to go downhill.
And it's not just what's on the inside, it's on the outside. You think of the lawn maintenance, whatever your setup might be, there's just a lot that goes into it.
And the pool. Oh, the pool. You're in that pool at least once every 2 years now. And if the grandkids don't come over, it's just a constant pain. But you got to pay that pool guy to keep it from turning green. And so those are the kind of things. But I also, just in a wrap on this, maybe now's not the time to buy. Okay. I would agree to that with the interest rates. I want to talk to the younger people who are out there. This is a great time to just store up your dry powder. I mean, you need to be investing. You need to be you say, well, I'm not that risky. Even if you think you're close to buying a home as soon as the rates do start to drop, maybe just in a high yield money market account at the bank, that down payment, so that if the market does drop off the table, you don't lose 50% of it. But I would do my best to keep that powder dry right now. And that means just don't use it. It's like, you keep your powder dry when the enemy's way away, and shooting really won't do any good anyway because you can't reach them. But when they get closer, then you've got a lot of dry powder to use. Okay. So that's the illustration there. So when the interest rates drop, have a big down payment ready. Be preparing the down payment because the stock market is still looking good this year, and interest rates are high in what they're paying in the guaranteed accounts at the bank. So get ready. Be prepared to jump whenever those rates do come down. Will you get them at the absolute lowest? Probably not. Only a few people did that even when it was down before. But be ready when the rates come down. This is still a great time to be preparing to buy a home.
Absolutely right. Yep. Well, let's turn our attention now to some of the positive implications of owning your own home, especially in retirement, because for a lot of folks, that is the right course of action to take.
It absolutely is. The biggest thing that I find is it gives somebody stability. It just, I mean, that's your home. I've lived in my home now for 22 years and I'm stable there. I walk my dogs. There are 95 houses in my little division there, right by Alta Vista Country Club in Placentia, and I can name the people. I walk my dogs every day, and I can name the people in probably 80 of those houses because I just know my neighborhood. I've been there. They know me.
Right.
I remember when over half of them moved in because they're not the original people who were there when I moved in 2002. So it just gives you stability from a housing cost. It gives you a fixed cost. If you've got a mortgage, you know what that mortgage is going to be, and it protects you against inflation because even in California, rent can only go up a certain amount here in California because we have some real restrictive rental laws,
Hmm.
but it's still going to go up. It's, they're going to go the maximum almost every single time. And if there's any other kind of loophole, like if they've done some improvements to the property, and that's one of those external loopholes where they can add more than 5%, you can pretty much believe that they're going to go up to the max.
Hmm.
Because just like we're talking about more expensive for you to buy, it's more expensive for that landlord to buy as well. So you got to have a little understanding for that. And then they're capped in with rates. But if you own your own home, you know what your mortgage is. It's predictable. And you have a guard against that inflation of the price going up every single month.
For sure. Well, and I know another argument. I mean, I remember this 20 plus years ago when I was fresh out of college, and my parents were encouraging me to look at even buying a home then. And the argument was, if you're renting, you're not building equity. So let's talk about that, because I think that that is a huge issue why a lot of people want to own, is this concept of building equity and having that asset of your home appreciate.
Well, it's based on the principle and the philosophy and the prediction and the hope that housing prices continue to rise, because we've had some dips for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year periods, maybe even 4 year periods. But generally, you can bank on over a long period of time the price of housing going up. So it's a good investment.
Hmm.
And it's a good investment in that every time you pay that mortgage, don't just look at the total amount that you're paying. Break it down into the PITI that you talked about earlier. Look at what you're paying on interest, look at what you're paying on taxes, but look at what you're paying on principal. Okay. Your principal is the key, because that's paying yourself back. If you've got a $3,500 mortgage payment and $2,100 of that is offsetting that principal every single month, that is building $2,100 of equity in that house every single month. You're paying yourself. That's like a savings account. And you don't get that with rent. What you're doing is you're building the equity for the landlord. Okay. So it's really important that you understand, that you are building equity. And what a lot of people do, those of you who are younger who are listening to us, all right, you say, well, I don't know, we can't get the big house that mom and dad have. Well, duh, they didn't have that big house probably when they started.
Right.
They started with what's called a starter home. And every month when you made that payment, instead of making a rent payment to pay the landlord equity, you make your own payment and you build equity, and you get $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 worth of equity as you pay the loan down and as the price of the house goes up. And then you're able to take another step to a bigger house. And then maybe that finally Taj Mahal house that you've always wanted in 10, 15 years, you might be able to get into that just by building your equity in the homes that you own, that are the starter homes and the stepping stone homes. So I do encourage people to buy your own home, because from a financial standpoint, it is just phenomenal.
Well, and there's also a lot of tax benefits to owning a home, including your mortgage interest being able to be deducted, property taxes. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, nationally now you can deduct up to $10,000 on mortgage interest that you pay in, and property tax. So those things that don't build into your equity that you see on your statement that we were just talking about, those things like the property tax that you pay, the insurance that you pay, the mortgage interest that you pay, all of that can be deducted up to $10,000. So many times, Kristen, I've seen people drop into actually a lower tax bracket because they were able to write off that $10,000 and not pay tax on it. Whether it's a lower tax bracket or not, you don't pay tax on that. So it's a tremendous advantage at times, not just the equity you're building, but the write-offs that you get. And then there's also, when you do go to sell that house, you as an individual, if you've lived in it the right amount of years and you've been there, then you get to write off an additional $250,000 of that equity growth and not pay tax on it as a capital gains and as a capital gain. And as A married couple, that deduction goes to $500,000. So there are tax advantages to owning your home as well.
For sure. And there's a lot of other psychological benefits. I know this might spill over into the next segment as well, but I mean, there's just so much that goes into this decision of whether you should continue to own your home or not.
You know, security and peace of mind. And I've had so many people who've come in and sat down, and their question is, should we pay off the home? And here's what I always tell them. The most secure people that I have in retirement, and many times the best people off financially, are the ones who don't have that mortgage payment, but they are so content. I know the dollars. If you're paying, if you've got a really low interest rate, you can say, well, I got a low interest rate. Does it make sense to pay it off? The peace of mind and the security of having that home paid for is unbelievable in retirement. What do we sell at Mosley Wealth Management? We try to sell you a comfortable retirement so you can relax, so that you can have stability, have security. And one of the things we do is coach you on the house. Do you want a retirement blueprint? We'll put one together for you, but you got to call in and ask for it.
And that number to call is 888-930-5609. We encourage you to reach out so that you can get your questions answered regarding this important decision for yourself and your family and your retirement. As Tom said, we will put a plan in your hands for no cost, no charge, no obligation. 888-930-5609. We'll be back with more right after this. Do you know how you'll generate income from your investments along with your Social Security in retirement? In our opinion, it's never too early to start the income planning process for your future. An income plan can help you work towards creating a steady stream of income to support you throughout your retirement years. Don't leave your financial future to chance. Take control today and start income planning for your retirement. Call the team at Mosley Wealth Management so we can help you design a complimentary written income plan to help you live the retirement you've always wanted. Call 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609.
This is Right on the Money with Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management. Get your own no-cost complimentary retirement plan review. 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609.
Welcome back to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management, and I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. Today, we are talking a lot about home ownership, to buy or not to buy. Should you be renting right now, given today's economic climate? But Tom, in the last segment, we're talking about a lot of the positive implications of owning a home during retirement. And we talked about some of the positive financial benefits, but there's several psychological and lifestyle benefits. I'd love for you to touch on some of those because they might not be as obvious to folks, but I know you do this day in and day out. You have this conversation with people a lot. Obviously, owning your home, figuring out where you're going to live in retirement is a huge piece of putting together someone's retirement blueprint. Talk about some of these other advantages that might not be as obvious on the outset.
Well, let's take my house. I've lived there for 22 years. When my daughter, Rachel, was 11, we moved in there. When at that time, Travis was 7. Travis is on my staff now. He's a senior advisor here at Mosley Wealth Management. And my 27-year-old, when we first moved in, was 5 years old. She hadn't even started the first grade yet. I have, standing in the front yard of that house, me holding her in my arms the day she went to first grade. So all of those memories, those are outside. I can remember memories we had in the backyard, and I can remember memories we had in the television room and in the living room, and funny things that happen, in the living areas that are upstairs. And you're going to walk away from all those memories, and don't tell me that doesn't mean something. It does mean something. And I go back also to the story of my mom and dad. They moved from Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2003 because my mom was about halfway through the course of Alzheimer's that eventually took her life. And in 2003, they moved down to Dallas-Fort Worth from the home they'd lived in for over 30 years. And I can remember my mom in those stages of Alzheimer's looking around that new house that was so much nicer, Kristen, than the house they lived in Tulsa. They lived in a renovated farmhouse in Tulsa. But I can remember my mom sitting there saying, to my dad, honey, take me home. I
Mm.
want to go home. And
Mm.
it so drove home that point to me that home is where your memories are and where your family
Right.
grew up. And I tell you what, I drive by, pardon the choke up a little bit here, but when I go back through Tulsa, Oklahoma, I drive by 1021 North Lynn Lane.
Mm.
And the house is all grown up. They use it for an office now, for a golf course that's there.
Mhm.
And oh my goodness, my heart just goes out because of all the memories of playing softball in the front yard and
Mm.
the barns and the goats my dad used to have. And every one of my kids learned how to drive on that field out back there in
Mm.
the back, and
Mhm.
because they couldn't run over anything,
Right.
except Rachel, my 34-year-old, did prove that she could run over a fence even in the middle of nowhere.
Uh-oh.
But 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 you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There are so many things it's yours. And
Mhm.
your memories are there, and that you know your neighbors,
Right.
and you know them by name, I hope, and I hope you do. And sometimes your kids don't want to leave that home. Sometimes you've got a kid that wants to have that home once you don't have it anymore. Sometimes you
Mhm.
don't. Okay, that's fine. Some people that I run into, Kristen, have children that's the only home their kids are ever going to be able to live in because just things that have happened in that kid's life, and
Mhm.
they don't have their tremendous act together like some do financially. And I've heard so many people sit in my conference room and say we have to hang on to the house because that's the only thing that little Johnny's going to ever be able to live in,
Mm.
and we have to give it to him or give it to them. So there's so many things there. Sorry, and I get a little choked up there when I'm talking about
Yeah.
mom, but I can
Mhm.
just remember her saying, honey, take me home. And there she was in her home.
Mhm. Mhm.
You're living in your home right now in many cases. And to think about moving somewhere else or giving that up
Right.
or doing those kind of things, it's probably something you really want to think through before you do it, because you're going to drive by and saying, dang, there's somebody else living in my house, and
Mhm.
I wonder what they've done to my living room and to my bedroom and to my bathroom and my kitchen, those
Right.
kind of things. And so there's so much about life,
Mhm.
not other things. I like to, on this show, I have always, from 19 years of being a pastor and 2 master's degrees and going to school, I've always tried to be a teacher.
Mhm.
And one person came into my office this week and met with me that said to me, they said, what I like about your shows versus what I call the infomercials that other people do is they're always begging you to call, to
Mhm.
come in, to see us. And they're teasing you with what they need to talk to you about. But this lady said, what I like about your show is you talk to me and you give me details and you
Mhm.
teach me things about what I need to deal with. Yeah, in the
Mhm.
middle of the session, we give you the phone number. At the end, we give you the phone number. But Kristen, if we have a fault, maybe from a financial standpoint for our own benefit, we don't ask people enough to call in. But because we're trying, you're an educator, you've been in this
Mhm.
field for years, and we're always trying to educate you and to bring it home to shoe leather.
Yep.
So that, when we're talking about your memories and living in your home, that's more than a dollar sign. That's
Yep.
more to consider than how much is it worth. And it's
Mhm.
not an item that you can, without emotion, just detach yourself from in many, many cases. And that's what we try to do on this show. But if you need counsel on what we've talked about, we've had 2 parts to this show, even though we've gone 2.5 segments. We've had 2 parts. Maybe don't own a home right now, maybe do own a home, and if you do, the value of that home. If you've got any questions, give us a call. We'll be glad to talk you through that.
Absolutely. And that number again to call to get your complimentary personalized retirement blueprint is 888-930-5609. Again, this is for no cost, no charge, no obligation. It's simply an invitation to have a conversation with one of the all-star advisors of Mosley Wealth Management to see how they can help and serve you. Well, Tom, you were just talking about the personal level, and you and I are both so passionate about financial education. And one of my mentors, when I first got into this industry, I've lived by this, and I believe it firmly, that personal finance is often more personal than finance. There's so much more than just the dollar signs and the bottom line that folks need to look at when they're making these important decisions for themselves themselves in retirement. And a house is not just a house. It's your home. And I think that's why it can carry so much weight when making these decisions.
It's so much can. That's your kingdom. That's your domain. You're the king, you're the queen of that place. My goodness, I flash back, Kristen, to so many years in the ministry where I realize I'm talking to some people where your home is not your pleasant place and not your quiet place. And I feel so much for you if your home situation, because of the people you live with, is just not healthy. But I'm talking about the memories that you have there that are good and that are positive. And so it's a really big decision.
Yeah.
And then we come to the last thing we want to talk about. And it's a lot of people that are out there and they're thinking about considering moving out of California. You read the statistics that California is the #1 state in 2022 and 2023 of people moving and moving out of state. So there are a lot of reasons, Kristen, that people do that. There's some reasons not to move too, though.
Right. And let's talk about all these things that need to be considered, because I know that you have even worked with folks who have made this big move. They've regretted the big move for various reasons, and they've actually come back. So you've seen it all in this conversation for sure.
Well, I be a financial advisor, if you understand my English there, okay? And it is a big financial decision if you move somewhere and that's not the right place. You move somewhere because you think you're going to like it. You sell a house here. The realtor loves you. You buy a house there. You don't like it after a year and a half, 2 years, so you sell it there. The realtor loves you. You move back here and buy a house. The realtor loves you. And, you've had 4 sales or purchases of houses that you've had to pay. And it can be a $125,000 to a $140,000 or more cost to you financially in making a wrong move somewhere. So why has it not worked? Let me run through some things. I've seen things work. It doesn't work sometimes when you move away from your family.
Yeah.
Your family's here.
Yeah.
Particularly your grandkids, okay? And here's another thing. You move somewhere else and you don't have any friends there. You've got to build a whole new social network. Your friends are here.
Yep.
Your social network is here. Hey, I have people who leave a job and they have emotional issues because their whole social relationships were built around that job that they worked 40 to 45 to 50 hours a week, and they spent more time with friends than they did family. Your doctor's here.
Right.
Okay.
You have to build a whole new medical network. What a headache.
And you have to get new medical coverage because especially if you're on Medicare Advantage, you have to get a whole new medical deal. And the climate here is not matched in very many places that you were able to move. You say, well, I can move to Florida where it's warm all the time, and I can move to Texas, but you've got bugs and humidity. I've lived there. I promise you that. So there are some reasons to consider not moving. Now, when we come back for the last session, I am going to talk about key considerations for you to make if you've made that decision to move. You are out of here. Well, okay, I'm going to talk through some of the key considerations, but here's what I'd like to tell you. Today, we're talking about your home. We're talking about housing. It's financial because it's probably the biggest investment that you've ever made, and it might be the biggest lump sum of money and equity that you have in your entire portfolio. It's a really important decision when you start playing around with, do I rent, do I buy, do I move? Do I stay here? And you need some input on not just the home, but how it fits with the other monies that you have, with the other things that you have. If you need that, you need to pick up the phone, call, and we have 6 all-star advisors, 5 offices across Southern California. We meet with people over Zoom so that we can see you there for the first time, and we can listen to your situation and give you advice, but you've got to pick up the phone and call.
Absolutely. That number to call is 888-930-5609. Of course, as Tom said, we're focusing on the homeownership piece today, but we know you might have questions about your retirement income strategies, wealth management, life insurance. How do you make your plan more tax efficient? How do you handle your investments in retirement? All this and more can be discussed when you come in for that personalized retirement blueprint. 888-930-5609. We'll be back with more right after this.
Is having $1 million enough to retire? For years, many have considered this to be the goal amount to have for retirement savings, $1 million. But that's the $1 million question. Is that enough for today's modern retiree? Are you sure you've saved enough for a 25 or 30-year retirement? Are you concerned about covering large expenses, including taxes and long-term care? If so, you're not alone. But there is a solution. With a comprehensive financial plan, you can take control of your finances to help you achieve your long-term goals. At Mosley Wealth Management, let us help you work towards peace of mind by implementing a complete retirement strategy. Call Tom Mosley and the team of Mosley Wealth Management right away to receive your complimentary, comprehensive written financial plan. 888-930-5609. Get your retirement right on the money with Tom Mosley. Call 888-930-5609 for your no-cost appointment.
Welcome back to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. And Tom, we are going to wrap up today's show by talking about some of the key considerations before people make the move out of state, out of California. You know, we talked about earlier that California is ranked as the #1 state that's losing retirees over the past couple years. You've seen folks move. I love that you've never marketed in any state other than California, and you serve clients across 23 states. And it's because people have made this move. And I know you have worked alongside people helping them figure out, is this the right decision for them? And in some cases it is, in some cases it's not. So let's talk about some of those key considerations that you know folks need to be paying attention to when they're trying to make this important decision of whether or not they should leave California.
Huge financial consideration. Number one, you want to know what it is, Kristen? This is not scientific, but I'll guarantee you this is the reason people say they're going to move. Grandkids. Because their kids have moved to Nashville.
Right.
All right. Their kids have moved to Idaho. Their kids have moved to Montana. Their kids have moved to Texas, Florida, you name it, fill in the blank. Tennessee. I just had one. My wife actually told me last night while we were sitting there watching, some Netflix deal or something. And she said, oh, by the way, so-and-so moved to Nashville. I said, really? Why did they move to Nashville? And I already knew the answer. This was a lady my wife knew when our daughters danced together on the dance team at Valencia High School in Placentia. And she said they moved because their daughter Janae moved out there and they've got a grandbaby. So, that's the reason people are moving. I can name you, without even thinking about it, I can name you probably 12 to 15 people right off the bat who've moved somewhere because of their family. Now, here's the precaution there. It's a financial decision because like we talked about earlier, you sell here, you buy there. And then what I have seen also, my next door neighbor, Rhonda, moved about probably 8 or 9 years ago now to Minneapolis. And she moved there so she could be next to her grandkids. And guess what? Her grandkids had moved from here to Minneapolis. And within 2 months of Rhonda moving there and buying a house, building a house, the whole 9 yards, the kids moved to Dallas.
Oh, wow.
Because if your kids move one time, they can move again.
Yeah.
So one of the most successful things that I always try to tell people to do is when you move somewhere, don't buy immediately. There's several reasons. If you move to a town that you don't know, you might buy that beautiful little place that you found, and then you might move there, and 3 or 4 weeks later, you find out that everything you like about that town is on the other side of town. And you have to drive through town or drive to the other side to go to everything that you really enjoy. Sometimes people say, well, I want my grandkids on the other side of town, so I can't be the drop-off destination. But and I'm just talking reality on this show, but be careful when you do move somewhere. I encourage people to rent for a year and also to rent their place here for a year. What does that do?
Yeah.
It keeps you from selling a house here, buying a house there. It allows you to look around and make sure you can always sell it later. And generally, you can sell the house here that you moved out of. You can sell it later if you've decided to do that for a higher price. And you sell it for a higher price, you get more for it, and you're able to pick out and find a good value and a good house or a good condo or whatever you want to move in there. So be careful following family. Be careful following family. A second thing is a lot of people and this is probably the biggest reason from a financial reason they give, is they say, well, the cost of living is just so much cheaper there.
Yes, I hear
Well,
that a lot. I want to get out of California. The taxes are too high, cost of living, right? But is that really true when you look at some of these other markets where people are heading?
well, there's certain elements of truth to it. I'm glad you asked that question because you can always find confirmation bias. You can
For
always
sure.
find something to back up your decision. Like you fly somewhere, you rent a car, and you pay $2.69 for gasoline, and you come back here and you have to fill your car up on the way home, and you pay $4.39. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we pay around $1.35 tax on every gallon of gasoline we pay here. And there's some states where you pay, like in Texas, like in Tennessee, less than 30 cents on the dollar. So more than $1 cheaper on the gallon, rather, more than $1 cheaper per gallon just for taxes that you pay here. So yeah, the cost of living is there. You can find housing at a lower price there. You can find housing with real estate there, with acreage there. My CPA moved south of Nashville to a little town called Spring Hill. A lot of people are moving there, and I call him every now and then because he's a good friend. He's still my CPA. He's retired, but he does some of our accounts still, and we're good friends. And the last few times I've called him, he's Dave, you sound so tired. He said, yeah. He said, I'm building a barn, and stuff. And I say, Dave, are you a contractor? He said, no, but I have to be out there watching it when they're building it, And so he's got like, I don't know, 15 to 20 acres. He's building a barn so he can have some things. So those are nice things to do, the cost of living. And a lot of people come along and they say, the tax situation is here so much. I hear this a lot too, Kristen, because they say there's no state income tax there. Now, you got to be careful that this is not a mousetrap. Okay. One of those that you get into and you realize once you're in it, you're trapped.
Yeah.
Because like Texas, I was given graciously by my father when he passed away in 2014, real estate, houses, rental units. And I was tickled to death that I wasn't going to have to file a state income tax and pay tax on the proceeds that I made from there because there's no state income tax in Texas. But percentage-wise, when it comes to property tax, so you got to consider and you got to look through all of the situations, just like with the cost of living. Your cost of living may be lower in housing and buying a house in Florida, but in Florida, your insurance on that house, because they have these deals called hurricanes. That's
Yes,
right.
you kind of trade in the earthquakes for the hurricanes, right?
Right. And I've had people that have moved from here to Florida, from California to Florida, and they've bought a house there, and they either have gone up 50% on their insurance in 1 year, or they've even closed and say, you can't get insurance. We can't find it anywhere. Even some places here in Southern California, because of fires, I've had people now, like in Anaheim Hills, finding real difficulty, and in Yorba finding real difficulty at times getting homeowners insurance, and the prices has escalated dramatically. So what I'm saying is when you consider cost of living, you've got to consider everything. One thing might be cheaper somewhere else. It might be higher in another area of something that you have to have. Your taxes you may not have a state income tax, but I've always said this. If they've got roads and bridges and libraries and public buildings and schools, they've got to get the money somewhere.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And if they're getting the money somewhere, and in Texas, I can tell you where it is. When I was shocked when I first started getting the property tax bill, and the houses that I inherited were worth about $150,000 at that time. They're now worth about $330,000. That's all well and good. But the property tax on those houses every single year is 3%, 2.75 to 3.25%, but right around 3%, because you've got the school districts, the trash district, we drove by and looked at your grass district. I mean, everything. They're taking it out of property tax. So your tax situation, check it all out. Make sure you understand that new place you're moving.
For sure. So many things to take into consideration. And I know you've said too, you recommend that people go visit for an extended period of time just to kind of try it out, try it on, right? Because there's nothing worse than putting all these things into motion, getting there, and then finding out that it's not the right situation for yourself.
I had one lady came in about 5 years ago and said, I'm moving to Scottsdale, Arizona. I said, that's great. What's in Scottsdale? She said, I just love the weather. She said, I was over there for a week and it was 79 degrees every day.
You said, what month were you there?
She was there in February.
Yes.
Exactly. And so sometimes when you just get something that you want to do so badly that you don't really look at a solid evaluation of that situation, you've got to go somewhere, especially if you're retired. You better investigate the healthcare situation there. What does it cost? Is it available? What's the quality of healthcare? I know like Texas has really good quality healthcare. Florida has good quality healthcare. There are some states where people are moving where healthcare is costly and the availability. I mean, yeah, you can get it. It doesn't cost much, but it takes 6 months to see a doctor there. So those kind of things and the moving expenses.
Yes.
You're going to have to fix your house up here to sell it. You're going to find a house and you're going to have to fix that house up because you're going to want to make it yours. There's so many factors. We've talked on this show. Let's do a wrap here. We've talked about, do I buy one? Do I just rent one? Probably better to just rent right now. Do I move here? Do I stay here? I don't know. Your situation is different than anybody else's. If you're still listening to the show, you've probably heard things that apply to you and things that don't apply to you. That's why we need to sit down with you individually. We start with a blank piece of paper and we say, okay, if you do move somewhere else, if the cost of living is cheaper there, what do you have enough money to make it? I have people who move other places and they have far more marginal money to live in retirement. That's a good thing. That's why 23 states are represented in my clientele. But before you do it, you need to think through it financially and say, is this really the right move for me so that I don't run out of money in retirement and I pay as little as I'm legally required to pay in taxes? We will build you a retirement blueprint that will apply to California or wherever you want to live. But you've got to pick up the phone and call and show your interest in getting some financial help. And we haven't mentioned this, but it's complimentary. It's free. We'll build that plan for you for free.
There's never been a better time for you to get a plan in your hands. Again, this is for no cost, no charge, no obligation. It's simply an invitation to have a conversation to see how the team of Moseley Wealth Management can help and serve you. We know that you've got questions, maybe stuff that we talked about today has really resonated with you and brought up some other questions you may have. There's no substitute for really sitting down in the financial planning environment and getting the answers that are personalized and customized to you and your situation. So again, that number to call to get your retirement blueprint is 888-930-5609. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Be safe, be happy, be blessed, and we look forward to being back with you next week here on Right on the Money with Tom Moseley.
Investment advisory services offered by duly registered individuals through Moseley Wealth Management Incorporated. Moseley Wealth Management and Moseley Insurance and Financial Services are affiliated companies by common ownership license number OB61811. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refers to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength, claims paying ability of the issuing carrier. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the needs of an individual situation. All hypothetical examples are provided for illustrative purposes only. They do not represent real-life scenarios. Moseley Insurance and Financial Services, nor its agents or representatives, may give tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any investment decisions. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Some of the information provided may be from one or more third parties, which we believe to be reliable sources, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Moseley Insurance and Financial Services.